Hey there, old school gamers, and welcome to another feedback discussion. So today's feedback discussion comes from one of our regular gamers on Discord, and this is a relatively new player, and so he wanted to ask about boundaries, or more modern term for that might be trauma triggers. Yeah, we always had those things. It's probably, back in this grumpy old GM's day, we just called them boundaries, or, setting boundaries or having boundaries. But regardless of the verbiage, it's a thing, always has been. So, first of all, the first thought is that a lot of people bring up when this kind of topic comes up is that fantasy role-playing games, D&D and otherwise, are inherently violent games. You've got a barbarian with a Vorpal axe beheading people and having fun with that. There are vampires sucking people's blood and stuff like that. So D&D and other fantasy games kind of inherently imagine violence from the start. Great fantasy epics. Whenever you have a story. Stories always have a conflict, and conflicts don't always have to be violent, but they often are, especially in fantasy epics, or especially when there are wars, or there are heroes who must stop a villain. A lot of times a villain has to be stopped with force. So D&D is inherently kind of a violent concept anyway. But having said that, one of my favorite quotes that you may have heard me quote a lot from Greg Gygax is that there is no right or wrong way to play this game. So whatever your table enjoys, or whatever play style your table enjoys, that's great for you. So what I'm going to kind of address here in this video today is kind of what you can expect from grumpy old GMs and Game Shop's basement and stuff. So in this discussion that I had with our friend, with our player, our member of the family here at the Discord server, that kind of made me think about it and put my thoughts together. And probably the quickest way that I could give somebody a picture of like what to expect at one of our tables is, I'm 51 years old, I'm an 80s child, and so what you could pretty much expect at one of our tables would be like 1980s primetime TV. And our friend commented, yeah, you probably have to say TV because 1980s movie ratings were all over the place. He said that he was pretty sure that Poltergeist was just PG, so okay, point taken. But primetime TV, not necessarily movies. Movie ratings are always inconsistent. That's a whole nother topic. So what brought this conversation on is that the individual who brought this to my attention, who kind of gave me the feedback that we're discussing today, he had seen the description of one of our games on the website startplaying.games. Startplaying.games is our booking platform, and one of the requirements on startplaying.games is that game masters, when they post games like I do, we DMs, we select trigger warnings from a list of trigger warnings and post them about our games. What I do for our games here at Game Shop's Basement, Grumpy Old GMs, is I just select them all and post them all. Because sooner or later, they're all going to come up. And some of them are kind of silly, in my opinion. I'm going to go into some of the sillier ones here for just a moment. Like spiders. Really? In a game like Dungeons & Dragons, you don't think there's going to be any giant spiders. Or snakes. In a game like Dungeons & Dragons, you don't think there's going to be snakes, both giant and otherwise. And do dragons themselves count as snakes? Because with some dragon body types, they're kind of serpentine. And violence, we already discussed violence. That's kind of inherent to swords and sorcery fantasy. That's the swords part of swords and sorcery. And a lot of the sorcery in swords and sorcery fantasy is throwing lightning from your hands and blowing things up. So some of the trigger warnings, I think, are a little bit silly, but some of them are a little more serious. Particularly ones that involve things like eroticism and sexual assault. So in 1980s primetime TV, like we said, there might be such a thing as a rape victim who needed justice in a cop drama or a legal drama or something like that. But the rape itself was not shown in detail. Eroticism. It's obviously people who are in intimate relationships, when they get naked with each other, they do erotic things. But that doesn't mean that we have to show this. So, there's no right or wrong way to play this game. So I guess if there are people who are into that sort of thing, but that's not really what we do here. So I'm going to kind of close out with a little bit of a horror story. There is a table. The first time that I went professional GM, I went for 10 months, paid all my bills with it, was doing it full time, doing 12 to 15 campaigns a week, and did it for 10 months from May of 2021 to March of 2022. And then I got a quote-unquote real job, and then I came back and I'm doing this again. So some of you know that story. But during the first time that I did this, there was a table that I really kind of had to shut down because they were doing something involving torture. Now, torture is another kind of a trigger warning on the StartPlaying.Games website. And torture is very dramatic. And so sometimes in an action movie or something like that, military drama, something like that, there may be times that information has to be extracted through interrogation. And usually this is a very dramatic thing, and that information that's needed from the torture is very important to the story. It's intelligence that the side that's doing the torturing just has to know, and there's no other way. But torture is a big deal. And in these stories, it's a big deal, and people of good conscience and good character, they definitely don't do it lightly, and some of them just are going to refuse to do it at all. But, very commonly in DC Comics, Batman will try to scare people. He'll use fear as torture, but he won't actually maim them or anything like that. So, now the thing is, there was a group that would consistently, when they fought a group of opponents, like bandits or enemy guards or something like that, a tribe of marauders, when they fought a group of opponents, they would purposely leave the last one alive for torture purposes. And they did this every combat that they could. It was their standard operating procedure. It was their modus operandi. It was just how they did things. And so these tortures had no point in the story. It was not, like I described, torture for a very dramatic, important story point. This was just torture just for pure sadism. And, they really wanted me as the game master, role-playing all the NPCs in the universe around them. They wanted me to actually role-play being tortured so that they could get their little jollies off as to what they were doing to these NPCs. And that table did not last, suffice to say. That table needed to be shut down. I talked to my oldest friend in the world, goes all the way back to high school with me, and these days he is a retired behavioral therapist, and he said, "John, these people don't need to be gaming, they need therapy." So, there's, as Gary Gygax said, there's no right or wrong way to play this game, but that's not how we play it here at Grumpy Old GMs or Game Shop's Basement. But if you guys have any thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share about limits or boundaries, or to use the new age terminology, trauma triggers, I think in my day we just called them things like limits and boundaries, things that were just off limits, or things that made people feel uncomfortable, which is still the way people refer to it today, things that make them feel uncomfortable. But if you've got thoughts about that, just let me know. Or if you ever have any questions or anything, just pop into our Discord. The Discord can be found at grumpyoldgms.com. You can find a Discord link. And so I think this was probably an important feedback discussion to have. But the next video will probably be about something happier. Well, at least as happy as a grumpy old GM can be, right? In the meantime, we'll see you around the gaming table. Hey, if you'd like to actually play with me as the DM or one of the other grumpy old GMs you might see on this channel, then reach out to our Discord. If you're seeing this on YouTube, it'll be in the comments down below. And if you're seeing this on TikTok, then just look for Grumpy Old GM's Discord server or come to our website, even better, even easier, grumpyoldgms.com. And if there's space at our tables, then, because I'm an actual real person, not one of these AI GMs that apparently D&D Beyond is supposed to be getting. Since I'm actually a real person, I only have so many nights and so many spaces at the table. But I keep the website pretty updated as to whether there's room at a table. So if you think about gaming with us, check out grumpyoldgms.com. All right, we will see you around the gaming table.